Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it anywhere and everywhere. You can even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works.
Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can go ahead and distribute your podcast to Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are heard.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take the conversation with your fans to the next level, Q&A polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify for Podcasters, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and get started. Hello, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Rick.
And we are here today with another episode. We're going to be going on to part 2 of our false flag Las Vegas shooting. If you didn't listen to part 1, go back and listen to it because we're not going to rehash it. We already hashed it, so we're not going to rehash it.
We ain't going to rehash
done enough
it.
hashing.
We done hashed it.
So go back and listen to that. But we have a couple of just items to go over. One of them is Bethany is about to have her baby, so she's not going to be with us for a little bit, but she will be back, so you won't see her for a bit. But
she's on podcast maternity leave.
Yeah, she's taking a little break, much needed.
She turned in all of her paperwork, everything's above board with HR, so that's good. She's going to be fine.
Unpaid maternity leave, though.
That's right. We can't wait for baby Malachi to get here. In fact, Kristen has asked for her birthday, which is December 10th, for all of you that are going to be sending her gifts. I know they're coming in the mail. It's fine. She just wants Malachi. That's all she.
I just want him to be here for my birthday. Yeah. It's not
so
too much
cute.
fast.
You're so sweet.
Oh.
And it gets me off the hook. I don't have to buy her anything for her birthday. So win-win. So
and then we've got a cool guest coming up for next week that Rick is going to explain because it was a super, super interesting interview.
Very interesting interview. I had a great time talking to John Kerwin. His episode's going to be coming out next week. We're going to kind of take just a brief break in the series as we continue to do more research and everything like that. But to get you guys another episode out, I interviewed John Kerwin. It was such a great time talking about conspiracy theorists. He has a book called The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, which is a funny title, but it's really, nowadays we have so much going on in the world that we're all talking about that sometimes it feels like you're on a different planet than some of the other people in the world. And he talks about a little bit how to navigate that and what are the stressors and why. Kind of gets into the scientifics of it. And then also we talked a lot about God. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So you guys don't want to miss that one. It's going to be super cool. That's going to be not this Sunday, but next Sunday. So obviously, because this one's this Sunday. I don't even know why I said that, but you get it.
We know what you meant.
Yeah, I don't know. I elaborated for nothing. Furthermore, I don't really say that word much, but furthermore, we're going to, after our series that we're doing right now, we're going to skip over at the end of it, and we're going to do on Instagram Live, we're going to do a Q&R. We're calling it Q&R, question and response, because we don't have the answers to everything, but we are going to do our best to respond to any questions that you out there in the Fringy verse have for us. So if you have any questions about Flat Earth, you have any questions about God, the Bible, false flags, all of the episodes that we've had up until now, we're going to do a big hurrah towards the end of the year and just do a Q&R, catch up with the people, figure out what you guys have. Nothing's really off the table when it comes to questions. You can ask whatever you want. Now, I will not guarantee that I'm going to even answer any of it, but You can ask.
You can ask.
Yeah. All right. So we know that you're raring to go. You're ready to get back into this. We left off last time just mostly talking about the official narrative. Kristen was going over a lot of the official narrative, and there's still even a little bit more an official narrative to kind of go over. This event was so packed full of weirdness that didn't make any sense that it's going to take a while to go over. So bear with us. Kristen, again, has lots of notes. And with that, I'm going to pass it to her, the brains of the operation, and we'll get into it.
So again, we're not going to rehash the last episode, but we kind
of hashed it.
We kind of left off where we talked a little bit about Paddock's dad, but I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about him because I think he's got a really weird story, really odd story. So he was convicted of bank robbery in 1961. Then he escapes prison in 1968. So then in 1969, he's put on the FBI Most Wanted list. I think we mentioned that. He holds the record for being on that list the longest. In September of 1977, he applies for and was granted a license to open a bingo parlor. He was investigated, but they somehow failed to realize he was an escaped prisoner. So, and I don't know how much people know about money laundering. It happens in all sorts of ways, but bowling alleys, bingo parlors, hair salons, barber shops, like that kind of stuff is pretty prime for doing money laundering stuff. So it seems odd that they would give him a license for a bingo parlor after they investigated him, air quotes, and they still somehow didn't know that he was an escaped prisoner.
Super odd.
In 1978, though, he was captured and arrested in September of 1978. He's then, which this just seems so weird to me, but he's then let go on parole. Okay, so you've got a guy who's already escaped prison and been on the run
he was
for
gone?
a very long time. I don't know. And then he's granted parole somehow.
Okay.
Yeah. So then he's arrested again in 1987 on 7 racketeering charges. But somehow,
so he learned his lesson, is what you're saying.
Right.
After the first round.
He's definitely turned his life around.
Rehabilitated, I'd say.
Right. So he's arrested for 7 racketeering charges, and he manages to escape with 0 jail time. And in fact, the only thing that did happen to him is he had a $100,000 fine. So
that's the weirdest thing.
It doesn't add up. Like, it makes me think, was he an FBI informant? Did he make some kind of a deal with the feds? Like, there has to be some reason, because this does not hold water for me.
No, I don't think it holds water for anybody. I mean, the fact that he escaped prison and then he has a business and he's doing all this different stuff, and then he gets arrested again and nothing happens. It's kind of like Epstein. You can get arrested over and over and over again, and for whatever reason, and nothing ever sticks, and you spend a couple days in jail, then you're back out. They call those spies working for like the CIA or the Mossad or something like that. The only way that you're getting out of prison like that and you're having all this paperwork confusion that you're seeing is because the government's involved in some way and they're pulling some shady stuff. That's my opinion. But it just seems like nothing in his narrative made any sense.
No. And also just that with Stephen Paddock himself, his story doesn't really make a lot of sense either. And he, spent most of his life working for the government.
Right.
He worked for the IRS, and he was an auditor, which auditor is a broad term that can be used for all kinds of things. So I don't know. It just seems weird to me. But so let's start with we didn't exactly go over the timeline. I know we mentioned that there's multiple timelines, that those get changed for whatever reason. In this day and age, with technology the way that it is and all the information that they had at their fingertips, they somehow still have a changing timeline. There's like at least 3, probably more actually, but I'm not going to go over all of them. But what I am going to go over is, and I'm going to give you the times that they're giving us, but that's just to give a time to it, really.
Right.
So police so the shooting starts, the Route 91 festival, Jason Aldean is performing. The police identify where the shots are seemingly coming from, because there is one window that's broken up in the Mandalay Bay, they say. So at 10:12, there is 2 officers that report gunfire from the floor above them. So they're on the 31st floor, and they're reporting that the gunfire is coming from the 32nd floor. At 10:17, officers reported that the 32nd floor, they get to the 32nd floor, and Campos, who, remember, was the security guard who went up to check out the open door alert and found the access door barricaded with this tiny L bracket. So the police run into Campos, and he points them to Paddock's room, says the shooting's coming from over there, blah, blah, blah. So between 10:26 and 10:30, there's 8 additional officers that arrive on the 32nd floor. And there is a lot of weirdness with these police officers and what happened, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay. So the gunfire at this point had ceased. There was no more shots being fired. So the police officers systematically moved down the hall, clearing the rooms, and they were using a master key that was given to them by Campos. He was, obviously like, hey, let's get these people out of here. So they used that master key and get everybody out. By 10:55, the officers had finished evacuating the guests, which is also weird because there's reports of people that were on that floor that said, nobody ever came to our room. Like, they seemingly didn't even really know that anything was going on.
Right.
So it's very odd, but yeah, we'll go with it. At 10:55, officers finish evacuating the guests. So then we fast forward to 11:20, and the police breached room 32-135 with explosives. So that was their entry into the big suite of the 2. Paddock is then found dead on the floor from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but there's, again, a lot of weirdness there, considering the official narrative came out that he'd shot himself in the chest with a rifle, which is very odd and doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Difficult.
Difficult, right? So they go in there, and he's laying, and we do have some pictures that Rick will put up of the crime scene. So if you're a little squeamish, I mean, things are blurred out, but still. He's laying on top of a rifle, and then obviously then the story changes, and he shot himself in the head with a revolver. Like, it was Colonel Mustard with the revolver. So he shoots himself in the head with the revolver, but he's laying on top of a rifle, and then over the top of him, he also has another rifle on a bipod. So this and the revolver that he supposedly shot himself with was like flung really far behind him, like in an unnatural way. Yeah. So those were some weird things about that part.
Well, my thought on the revolver is just weird. Like, you got a guy that's, whether he's an arms dealer, which I think he is, or he's just some guy that wins a lot of money at poker, and he's pissed at the government, so he decides to shoot up a bunch of Trump supporters. Like, whichever narrative you go with, the whole revolver thing doesn't really make that much sense, because, like, most people don't really use revolvers that much anymore, unless you're kind of, an older guy, or you're kind of a Western dude or whatever. Right, most people that are carrying the type of military type guns that he had, M4s, 308s, 100-round magazines, bipods, very tactical type stuff. I mean, he would have had something more like a Glock, or, something that's a little more tactical. It just seems like he was kind of in a tactical lane, based on the weapons that were in there.
Yeah, now, I would agree.
Those could have been provided by anybody. Those could have shown up anytime, anywhere. But, not to get ahead of myself, these revolvers just doesn't even, it's like it doesn't fit in the scene. One of these things is not like the other type thing, No,
I agree. So they stumble upon this scene, they get into 135, and then they realize that suite 134, which is obviously the adjoining room, is locked from the inside. So this is another weird thing. They said in the official narrative that Paddock was running back and forth between the two rooms. Well, how could he be doing that if 134 was locked from the inside? And again, 134 is the room where the window was broken. And that was where they found those 8 casings that went over to the airport. So anyway,
in the one room, there's a window broken, and in the other room, there's a window broken, and there's a door in between the two. And
right.
the official narrative is stating that he's going through into the other room, shooting out of that one, and going through the other room and shooting out of that one. However,
but somehow this whole shooting only lasted 10 minutes.
And it was locked from the inside. So there's literally no way for him to run back and forth.
Right.
If he's dead on the floor in the room that's open, then the locked door has nobody in it.
Right. Right. Mystery.
It just doesn't make any sense.
So they then have to get into 134 because it's locked. And so they breached 134. And this is really, so I guess I should say, in the 8 officers that we were talking about, they were in the elevator, and there's body cam footage. All of them are wearing body cams. That's what we as taxpayers pay for, is for them to wear these body cams.
Yep. So go Nevada. You paid for all those body cams. Good job.
They did a lot of good here. So they're in the elevator, and they have been told to wait for SWAT. So they're in the elevator, and then all of them, it's like one person goes, we got to turn off our body cams. I think we need to turn off our body cams now. And then it's like repeated over and over and over. Turn off your body cams. Make sure your body cams are turned off. So then they all go dark, right? But there's one guy who was actually a canine officer, and it almost looks like he tried to turn off the body cam, but like instead of turning it off, he just kind of twisted it. So it was like, it was misaligned. It wasn't pointing forward. It was more pointing like at a space, but it was still recording, which is very important. So when they breach into room 134, one of these officers, there's only one SWAT officer in this whole crew, but somehow they still go in. So they get into 134, and one of the officers shoots on accident, a misfire, whatever you want to call it, a 3-round burst, which I know that you can obviously have on like full automatic or whatever, and there is a 3-round burst setting. So does that mean you push the trigger one time and 3 rounds come out? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. So they breach the room, and there's a 3-round burst that is accidentally discharged, but nobody is hurt, is what the official story is. Nobody's hurt. It's just whoopsie. We made a mistake and shot into this room on accident. So weird.
That's wild, because, and the whole thing about waiting for SWAT doesn't make any sense to me, because in all of the active shooter literature and all of the active shooter trainings that everybody's been through, I've conducted them, been through them multiple times. All the literature says that you're not waiting for SWAT.
You're not waiting because when there's the possibility of a loss of life. You're not waiting for SWAT to come in. That's
right.
It's ridiculous.
If you have hostages and stuff like that, where you have hostage negotiation going on, a barricaded suspect, all those things, then you would want to wait for the proper time to breach and all those things and get negotiation going. But you're not going to wait for SWAT in an active shooter scenario. They're just not going to.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
So at 11:27, after they breached room 134, they announced over the radio that the suspect was down. So that was kind of like, oh, cool. End of the story, right? No, absolutely not. So they're in the report of the officers that breached that room. There was 8 of them: SWAT Officer Hancock, Officer Newton, Officer Donaldson, Officer Trapeze, I don't know how to say that one, Officer Walford, Officer Magsese, and Officer O'Donnell. And then there was that Sergeant Bitsko, who was the canine officer, and he was the only he was the canine officer, didn't have his dog, but he was the only one that had his body cam still running when they go in there. And there's a little bit more on that picture. On episode 762,
if you have your body cam on, and the most important part of this, my thing is, it's like, if somebody was to turn around and tell me turn your body cam off, I'd be like, why?
Right. And there's a video of this. I mean, there's body cam footage of this happening, and they all just go, okay. And they all key off their body cam, which just seems weird. This seems like the most opportune time to have the body cam running, because then you know exactly what happened.
You could get fired for turning off your body cam. Like
That's
the
true.
reason
I never thought of that.
for your body cam being on is so that you can be in interaction with Joe Public, and there can be record of that. And so it either goes in favor of Joe Public or it goes in favor of the police station, but that comes to litigation later on. But if somebody tells you that's on the force, tells you to turn off your body cam, you're now going against the rules of the precinct that has put this into. I mean, there's a reason that they bought all of them and they put it into play. So,
well, and it's
turning them off.
It's like going to work without your tools. You know, like if you're a contractor, you're not going to go to work without any tools because you're not going to get anything done. Like, it's one of your tools, the tools of your trade, and they need to be kept on. So,
well, especially in this day and age of litigation and everything like that, it's like if you're going to go into the room where you're having a mass shooting, apparently there's somebody shooting out of this room with a machine gun, you know, they say, and you want to go in there, you know that this is, if he's alive or if he makes it out of there, you know that this is going to trial.
Right.
Yep. If you capture this guy, he's going to trial. And so what evidence do you have of the room and all of those things? Well, we don't get any of the room evidence until later, and those are just snapshots, and those can all be staged.
What's funny about when we did get the body cam footage, so essentially the police department and the city had to be sued actually multiple times to release this information. But they did finally get sued and had to release this body cam footage. But nobody talked about it. It was like, it wasn't really reported on. In fact, it was really weird. And we have a graphic of the reporting within 10 days of this shooting. Like pretty much almost all reporting had ceased. There was very few news stories that were still talking about the Vegas shooting, which is really weird. Because a shooting, especially the biggest shooting from a single gunman in the United States, would be a huge story, right? You would think.
For months.
But for months, years even, right?
Yeah. People still talk about Columbine, and that happened in, 99?
Exactly. No, so the graphic is like, you know, here, there's lots of stories, and then whoop, drops all the way down, and there's like barely anything about it. Which is probably why people don't really remember it. And when you tell somebody, do you remember the 1 October shooting? They have no idea what you're talking about. Literally no idea. If you say the Vegas shooting, then it you know, turns on a light bulb, or the Jason Aldean concert shooting or whatever. But nobody calls it 1 October, and nobody was talking about it. And there's video of people that, you know, live in Vegas, work in Vegas, at the casinos, and they're like, nobody is talking about this stuff. It is so weird. Nobody's talking about it anymore. Okay,
yeah,
so
for a situation to just be swept under the rug like that, and, you know, no more news, no more nothing. It's just, these are the things that we like to, as conspiracy theorists, point out to people and say, these are things that make you go, you know, this is one of those moments where you should, instead of retreating from this, like, well, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to go about my day and do something else. No, we should lean in to it, and we should say, okay, what is the truth? Because we should be hungry for the truth.
Okay, so this stuff gets weirder and weirder. So let's go to a little bit of the response immediately following the shooting. So the McCarran Airport, obviously, which was right next door and had the rounds fired into the jet fuel tank, they're shut down for several hours. They grounded flights. They had to reroute more than 25 flights. So there should have been no air activity, which is going to come into play in a little bit. Airport operations, though, at McCarran resumed at 12:40 a.m. on October 2nd. So they were really only closed. And there was more than one 911 call that there was an active shooter at the airport on the runway. Yeah. But somehow they're back up and running by 12:40. And this shooting is completed at 10:15. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, especially considering they have another airport in Vegas. That's not the only airport. Right. So more on that. later, obviously. We have a lot more. Most of the strip was actually closed. They had SWAT for whatever their job was, but they were going around the strip and trying to collect evidence and trying to, I think probably trying to figure out what the heck is going on. There was a state of emergency that was announced for Clark County at 2:45 p.m. the next day. So they
next day.
Yeah. So they did a state of emergency, which I'm assuming comes into play because then you're eligible for certain like funding, and I don't know like what was the point of it, but I know that their hospital was hit really hard with people and blood and guts and all kinds of stuff. So it could have been to, help with that kind of thing. Maybe they sent some National Guard people in to help with the hospital. Because, I mean, you have the initial shock of all these people getting shot, but then there was 800 and something people that ended up being injured because people got trampled. It was crazy. It was crazy. And what they didn't say on the news ever was that there was shootings going on that whole night. It wasn't just this one 10-minute escapade. There was shootings going on all over the place. And you guys, if I had all the time in the world, I would have gone through all the 911 calls, but there was so many 911 calls that night. It was absolutely bonkers, the number of 911 calls that went on, that came in that night, of specifically shooters or people
from
acting
all over
weird.
the strip.
From all over the place. Let's see. Let's do a little bit of in Paddock's room. So some of the stuff that we do have some pictures for some of this stuff. If you're squeamish, probably not the best time to look at it. But so when they approached Paddock's room, there was that webcam that was on the room service card sitting outside of his room. But the funny, and it wasn't recording, it was just a live feed. But the funny thing is that the computer that this was broadcasting to was nowhere near where Paddock was shooting from in either room. Let's say he was shooting from both rooms somehow. Okay. This computer is nowhere near. So if you're, staging a whatever big shooting, a big deal like this, you're going to want to watch the door, but you're going to want to have it like near where your center of operations are, right? This was like way off because this was a suite that was really big. This was like way off like over by itself. It wasn't anywhere near. And the guns that were in the room were just kind of like laid out all over the room. They weren't like, lined up, because obviously if you're going to shoot down into a crowd of people, you're going to have to shoot through a window because that's your only access point. There was no sliding glass door or nothing like that he could get out of. So why wouldn't you have all of your weapons lined up like in front of the window? Yeah. But they were all over the room. They were like on the couches and on the beds and laid out much more like somebody was coming to look at them, not like he was planning on using them, in my opinion, is what it looks like. Right. There was a handwritten note that was found in his room that no handwriting analysis was done on, so we don't know if it was really Paddock that wrote it. But there was a handwritten note found in his room that was calculating like distance and wind speed and trajectory and all kinds of stuff like that from his room to the concert goers at the festival, which seems okay. Yeah. It seems planted to me, like if I'm being honest.
Well, this whole situation seems planned. His whole room seems staged.
It does.
And when you do an analysis of the pictures and you're looking at all of that, like nothing really makes sense tactically, especially if you're a tactical person like me. You're looking at these things for like you were saying, your gun should be laid out, your mag should be laid out. You're not running all over the place. And usually if you're going to get into a situation like this, you would want a spotter. And you would want another shooter. You'd probably want a 3-man team for something like this. One in one room, one in the other room, and one spotting and watching your six. There's not a reason why you would have a hallway camera if you're going to be on the gun, because you're not going to see it.
Right. And supposedly he was watching the live feed because he knew that that compost was was there and shot 30-something rounds through the door at him.
Yeah, so or somebody was watching the feed.
How is he shooting over here through the door, but then also shooting over here? It just doesn't make any sense. So here enter this guy. I'm sorry. When I even just look at pictures of him, he makes me like, ugh. So Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo. He was the dude. He was the dude in charge, right? So he does a press conference.
MVP of losers.
Right. So he does a press conference on October 4th. And he stated that there was evidence, which he declined to discuss the specifics, but there was evidence that Paddock intended to flee the scene and may have an accomplice. So, but this was on October 4th, and according to everybody on October 2nd, and according to the police department, he acted alone. He was a lone wolf. It was a lone gunman, right? So now all of a sudden, and what else is weird is when they went into his room, they found a bulletproof vest, which he was not wearing. Seems like something you might put on before you start this type of thing. So they find a bulletproof vest, and they find a breathing apparatus in case he was gassed, which is really weird because then they later explain it was basically a snorkel that was taped to the outside, to the window, so that if he was gassed, he would be able to still breathe. So he has that level of forethought, and yet I don't know. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Again, going back to the staging of equipment, like why doesn't he have the vest on? Why is he not prepared, for these things? And
if he's a lone gunman and he's going to go out in a blaze of glory, which is what they kept saying, why did he only shoot for 10 minutes? Why did he stop? You think a security guard coming down the hallway is going to stop him from shooting if he's this set up and he's this, like dead set he's going to do this thing? Compos is not going to scare him. Like, come on.
No, and the amount of magazines that were in his room, 100-round magazines, stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of 100-round magazines full of rounds. Like, why did he stop? Why would you stop and kill yourself? Because they didn't breach the room for an hour after the shooting stopped. 1 hour. Which
is funny because there's more on that in a little bit. But
yeah.
So then there is this body cam footage that we do end up getting from the police department. When they are in room 135, which is the suite, there's one pillar. There's multiple pillars in there, but there's one pillar that has a window to the right of it. And this is the window that he supposedly shot from. Okay. And it's literally like, if you look at the schematics of the room, this is the only possible location that he was at. So when they're in the room, you can see the officer pan over this way, and they say multiple times, this window is not broken. The curtain is open, but the window's not broken. And they're like, no, it's not broken. Like over and over and over again, very adamant that this window is not broken. Which we'll get into that. Okay, so I'm not even convinced that a bullet would break one of these windows, because these are supposed to be hurricane force windows. Supposedly he broke them with this little like miniature mallet. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. Like, some officers are like, well, even with a bullet you wouldn't have been able to break that. Like, it takes like an explosive charge in a square pattern or whatever, because you have to get it from multiple areas in order to break through a window like that. So
right.
That part is really weird, but it's very, very clear that window is not broken. The curtain was open, but there was no damage to the curtain, no damage to the window. Not to mention, on the video camera, you can see the officer that's standing over there. And when you look at the crime scene photos, there's glass and brass and all kinds of shrapnel all over the floor. So when this camera is looking at the officer, who's very clearly saying this window is not broken, he's standing on nothing. He's standing on clean carpet. There's nothing on the ground there. You would have heard his boots crunching on it. Probably you would have heard boots crunching the whole time, because this glass was all over the place, right? There's
Yeah,
no
when you see the
sound.
official pictures, there's stuff all over the ground.
All over the place.
But in the feed from that camera that was supposed to be turned off but wasn't, there was none of that. Clean carpet.
No shrapnel on the ground. And again, no damage to the curtains, nothing like that. So, and then the BBC, who, whatever, they're probably corrupt also. I mean, they're all owned by the same place, but they were reporting all night that there was only one window broken. So they're like, there's one window broken in this room 134. And, you know, that was the narrative that everybody went with that whole night, because there was only one window broken.
Yeah, and it was the one in 134, which is
correct.
where they found the 8 casings.
Right.
So those 8 casings that were used to shoot at the airport were the only casings that were found officially in the room. You know, according
on the video cam, yeah.
According to the video camera and according to the reports, the initial reports from the officers and from everybody else, there was only 8 rounds that were fired, and those are the only ones that they found.
So here's a fun one: the aerial helicopter footage, because you know the Metro whatever came and had their helicopter up there. So they're essentially the only ones that could confirm what windows were broken. That video footage is missing.
Oh,
I hate it when I misplace my video footage like that.
Don't you? When you misplace your camcorder?
Yeah. I mean, we all know the video footage that we saw the next day of the 2 windows and the curtains flapping around in the wind through the open window. It was very dramatic, right? But
there's 9/11.
Yeah, there's no nothing that, no footage that shows there being 2 windows broken. But by morning time, somehow there was 2 windows that are broken, which I
say sus. That's
definitely seems sus.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Sus.
Yeah. So, like I said, they initially said that Paddock shot himself in the chest with a rifle, but then after this crime scene, or after this body cam footage did eventually get leaked out, and some crime scene photos got leaked out, then they changed their story to he shot himself in the head with a revolver. So, but until that stuff was leaked, they were saying he shot himself in the chest, because if you look at the crime scene photos, there's very obviously a chest wound. It's not just a head wound.
Yeah. So how does a person shoot themselves in the head and in the chest?
Right. It was also weird and very suspicious, because when they did get into room 135 and they're panning around and you're looking at this window and all this stuff, it's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you don't know what you're looking at, and like you said, you don't have that tactical brain, it just looks like whatever. It's not like, you know, not a big deal. But there's also no body on the ground. So where his body was laying should have been visible in this body cam footage, but there was no body. And the other thing,
step over him.
Right, they would have literally had to step over him. The other thing that was weird about his body placement is it looks like, and we have this picture, but it looks like there is a darker. So for those of you that don't know, obviously I'm a nurse and I'm very medical, but blood is bright, or frank red is what we would call it, frank red when it first comes out. But then as it's exposed to oxygen, it starts to turn brown, which I'm sure everybody knows. That's why your scabs are brown. So in this picture, it looks like there is some older blood. And the reason that you can tell the difference is because it's more brown and it appears to be more dry. And then over the top of that, by his head, where his head is laying, there is that frank red blood on top of what looks like a much older blood stain. So that was a weird, like, the crime scene photos just don't add up. The other thing that was weird is there was no like arterial spray, there was no blood spatter, there was no brains all over the place. Like when you shoot yourself in the head, it's messy.
It's a mess.
It's not to be gruesome or anything, but it's one of the messiest ways that you can kill yourself. That's just how it goes. Okay.
Yep.
So there's no arterial spray, there's no blood spatter, there's no brain matter, there's nothing like that in any of this footage.
They just keep stacking up. The hits just keep coming.
So then here we go with Sheriff Lombardo again. So he's doing an interview. He did a lot of them actually, which was really weird. And I thought it was really weird the way, because let me just explain it this way. I don't think that all of those cops for the Las Vegas Police Department are corrupt. I really don't. I think that they were following orders. I think that they were doing their job. I think the people that are corrupt, just like in any other situation that we've already talked about, it's like the top one or two at at the top, and then the rest of the people are just doing their jobs, right? But I definitely do think this Sheriff Lombardo was correct. But he's
definitely controlled.
Yes, for sure. And he definitely looks like, in a lot of the interviews, looks like he's got like a handler that's standing behind him in a suit that's kind of, and you can see him on several occasions lean forward and say something. And, it's just a really weird, like if you know body language and you're watching these two interact, it's really, really weird.
And that handler's wearing an FBI pin on his lapel, by the way.
Yeah. So he's doing so essentially the media kind of like almost starts to crucify him a little bit, because they're like, you're not giving us anything. Like, you're telling us you want to solve this case to, make sure that the public doesn't panic and all this other stuff, but you're not telling us the truth, which is actually making everybody panic.
Right.
So he gets very, direct. And this is a quote from him. He says, "Nobody is attempting to hide anything in reference to this investigation. The dynamics and the size of this investigation requires us to go through voluminous amounts of information in order to draw an accurate picture." So he very clearly is trying to make it appear he's above board, I guess. But what he's actually doing is so not above board. Like, he's not releasing things. People are having to sue the department in order to get information. Like, it was just super weird. So Lombardo,
they're not releasing anything. Yeah. I would agree with him from a point of view that is, if I was to play devil's advocate, I would agree that this investigation of this thing is going to take a long time, and there is going to be a lot of pieces and a lot of parts. But there are certain pieces that you should know already, that, early obvious things. Well,
and you tell me, if he's the sheriff, so these police officers that are in the elevator, rewinding. Here we go. So we're going back to the 8 police officers. Somebody higher up than them told them to turn off their body cams. Would that order have come from Lombardo?
It could have. I mean, he's the sheriff. So there's Metro Police, and then there's sheriff, because it's county. So you got county sheriff, he was ultimately in charge of the whole thing. But then you have all the other city police, Metro Police. And so who knows who gave the order, but it has to come from somewhere. It has to come from up above, because anytime
he most certainly would have known that order was coming down, or getting to eventually. His men. He would have known that at least by October 4th, when he's doing this interview. I mean, it just seems weird. Yeah. So let's go through a few. Or do you have more on that?
No, that's good.
Okay. Sorry, I know I'm going fast, but we have so much to go through. So some of the discrepancies, that everybody remembers the Sandy Hook shooting, right? It was the school shooting, tragic, awful. There was a 1,500-page report that came out after that shooting of everything that happened. It was all the details. So 6 months after this Vegas shooting, this report that they released has 3 pages.
3 pages.
Yep. Okay. So then after a year, it bumps up to 187 pages, but it's essentially just an after action report. So there's no. It basically just goes through what the police department's response was to this. It didn't have any answers of anything, no motives, no nothing. It was just an after action report, like.
Yeah.
But a 1,500-page report on a school shooting, which is tragic and awful, but as far as loss of life, way more at this Vegas shooting, and we ended up with 187 pages.
Well, and a lot more logistics, right? There's a lot more
totally.
going on.
Yeah.
Especially like you were talking about the 911, all of the calls from the 911. Somebody would have to go through all of those 911 calls and figure out all of that. And they should include a summary of all of that information
right.
in
I
the
mean,
report.
It should be detailed, like victim by victim by victim.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking just casualties, what we're like in near 60 people, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at least all of those people get a page. They've all got an autopsy report. They've all got
Mm-hmm.
forensic analysis of their body and where they were positioned and, you know, all of that. So they at least should have one page each, but you'd think it would be multiple pages, you know?
And the
So
amount of witnesses, if you're taking witness statements,
Yep.
you can get thousands of witness statements out of Vegas if you
yeah.
wanted to. So 187 pages is just asinine for this
Right.
type of an investigation. It doesn't make any sense. It's a slap in the face to the American people.
It is. And it's hard to know
like
whether
you don't have to say.
Right. It's hard to know whether is it just sheer negligence or is it more nefarious than that? Negligence is one thing. Okay, whoops, we turned our body cams off on accident.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody turning them off at the same time, that seems much more nefarious than just sheer negligence, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
when we get to the stuff that you're about to talk about and continue to stack on, I think we'll all agree towards the end that something's fishy here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So another thing that was really odd was they did not test Paddock's hands or his clothing for gunshot residue, which
why would you?
It seems like a simple test to do. Like, okay, I don't know. I guess I don't really know what the protocols are for something like that. But you would think when somebody's getting an autopsy, that would, and he was like a mass shooter, that would be one of the first things they would check, was to see if he actually had gunshot residue on his hands, because he was not wearing gloves.
Well, nobody was trying to figure out who did it. And this is the problem with things like this, with narratives like this. Nobody's trying. The same thing with 9/11. Everybody says it's bin Laden. Bin Laden, is the guy that did it. And everybody just assumes that's the thing. And the investigations don't happen. There are no investigations. It's just Paddock. He's the guy. We already know he's in the room. Even though the guns are not set up in the correct position and the window's not broken in the room that he's in, and the door's locked to the other room where the window is, none of that matters. It was him because he was laying there on the floor, but he wasn't.
And it was like within an hour, right? It was like within an hour that they had released his name as the person, not just this. It was this guy's room, but this is the person.
This just goes to show you that they already knew. Right. They already had a narrative. They already knew who the guy was. They've already placed it on him, and there really is no need to do an investigation when it comes to clothing or gunshot residue or anything like that, because they already think that they have the guy.
Right. So another part of it was that they didn't do any forensics to match any of the ballistics from the weapons in the room to any of the shots fired down on the ground. They didn't.
Speaking of the autopsy, sorry to interrupt. Didn't the coroner have to be sued himself?
Oh, yeah.
Personally,
yeah. His office was sued, and they still couldn't get the autopsy reports, so they actually ended up suing him because to be a coroner, you're basically like an MD. I mean, you've got, so they had to sue him directly in order to get the stuff. And there's much more that comes out in the autopsy reports, not just from Paddock, but from a lot of the victims too. But so they did no forensics to match any of the ballistics. They did no forensics on the weapons at all to see that if they were even fired recently. Like, can you tell if a weapon's been fired recently, or is it kind of like if there's gunshot residue from it being fired once, it's just always there? How does that work?
If those police officers walked into that room and he just got done shooting an hour earlier, which is the official narrative, those barrels of those weapons would still be hot with the amount of rounds that were thrown. So the barrels would still be warm, at least, and there would be lots of carbon in and throughout the weapons. and the carbon is from the rounds. So you would know, and that's what is also on the hand when they're doing the gunshot residue. It's the spray back of that carbon that's coming from the cartridges. And so they would have had that carbon smell in the air. They would have had that gunshot smell in the air. It would have been probably a cloud in there.
Would it have set off a smoke alarm, or do those just go off based on heat?
It would have set off a smoke alarm if there was enough rounds fired.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're talking thousands of rounds, yeah.
Yeah. So it would have set off the building alarms for sure. And it would have been very easily discernible whether those guns were fired an hour ago or not, in my opinion, or if they were brand new and clean.
So, spoiler alert, the smoke detectors never went off. They were not going off. They never went off until a little bit later, which we'll get into. But so as far as Paddock's autopsy report, the chest wound that he very obviously has in the crime scene photos and was the first narrative that was spit out, that chest wound was omitted completely from the autopsy report.
The official
autopsy report had nothing about a chest wound on it.
But this picture right here that I'm putting up right now shows that there is
definitely, yeah. It's a circular blood stain in the middle of his chest. I mean, there's not much else it could be. So let's go over a little bit while you're getting that picture up. Let's go over a little bit of the inconsistencies with the police officers that were in the room. So in the official report, it has those 8 officers that I listed off earlier as being the only 8 that were present in the room. However, in the video footage, you can see Officer Brett Brosnahan and Corey Mickelson, who were 2 other officers for the Las Vegas Police Department that were very clearly in the room, but they were omitted from that whole report. So according to the official report, they were never in the room, and their body cam footage is missing.
Just completely missing.
Weird.
So when they subpoenaed it and they won and they asked for all the footage, that footage is just missing and they weren't able to provide it.
And they would not give any explanation as to why these 2 men were in the room but not listed on any of the reports as even being in the hotel. Like they were not even supposed to be on the premises, but on the video, you can hear them and see them very clearly that they were there. So I'm not sure what to make. A lot of this stuff is like, okay, they're inconsistencies, but I don't know what to make of them. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tie it up in a perfect little package and make it make sense, because it just doesn't. There's just a lot that doesn't. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about the media coverage. After 10 days, the media coverage goes to basically nil. They never found a manifesto from Paddock. Let's see. So here's this. They have these reports, and you can go on and find them where we have that documentary we put on the last episode. But she's got a ton of pictures and screenshots and videos and all kinds of stuff that kind of, backs up a lot of this stuff. But another really weird thing was the door locks. We talked a little bit about the key card and the door locks and the deadbolt, how it has a sensor, blah, blah, blah. So on the day of the shooting at 12:03, mind you, the police department still at this for a very long time, until they were sued again, said that he was by himself in this room. Then it comes out that there's 3 women that are registered in the room with him. And the food service, I mean, if you're looking at the room service stuff that they got, the food they got, it wasn't. So this is how, if I'm by myself and I'm just super hungry, and I do this sometimes where I don't know what I want, so I'll order 2 meals, and then I just
tell me
eat a little bit of both because I can't decide what I want.
Yeah.
So let's say I would order a hamburger, but then I also wanted some Alfredo, so I would order both of those, and then I would order a Coke or whatever I wanted to drink, a Dr. Pepper. So the way that these room service orders came in, it was like 3 separate meals with 3 separate drinks. So would you order, I'm going to get a hamburger with a Coke, and then I'm going to get an Alfredo with a lemonade, and then I'm going to get this thing with a water. That's not how you would order it, right? So it came across, and this was for the whole time that he was in these rooms. This is how the room service orders were coming, which to me just shows very clearly there was more than one person in there. I mean, and now we know that there was more than one person in there. So there was,
well, because they're on the hotel information, right? As
right. So because they're registered
actual guests,
yeah, they're registered. And when they did release the report that had these women's names, they had redacted their last names, and there was no investigation supposedly into these women. So were they prostitutes? Were they honeypots? Like what were they other than present? They were present. That's all we know. They were in that room.
Yeah.
So
it's weird, when the more that you get into this narrative, the more you dig in, the more you're finding that they're just lying to you left and right, and they refuse to give you the answers. So the city and the county, there's this thing with state and local law enforcement and stuff like that, where they have to give you this information. You have to be able to get on and see what all incident reports, all stuff, it's all public
it is
information.
And 911 calls included. So you can get online and you can listen to the thousands, I'm talking thousands of 911 calls that came in that night, because it's all public record.
Yeah. So the fact that it is public record and they're not giving it, and you have to sue them to get it, just tells you that they're hiding things. They're hiding things. And at that level, maybe not at the police officer level, like we said before,
right.
The corruption doesn't always run all the way through the ranks. The corruption just really has to be at the top, where they are the funnel, right? Everything comes from down below and funnels up through them. And when the official narrative goes out, that's that's where it has to make sure that it goes through those at the top, like the handlers, like that FBI guy, Lombardo, that snake. All these people are the ones that are making those decisions at the top that say what gets released, what doesn't get released, what's redacted, what's not redacted, all of that stuff. So just all of these things that we've laid out up until this point, all of these discrepancies that they're not really willing to talk about, and they're not, you have to subpoena them and take them to court to be able to get. It's just ridiculous. They should be giving it away for free to the public, because that's what you're supposed to do.
A level of transparency when you are in charge of public safety. There should be a level of transparency, and I feel like that there are laws in place to do that, but that doesn't mean that they're being followed, right? So you can have all the laws that you want. It's illegal to speed, but I speed every time I drive the car. Like it's just whatever. So as far as, there's a whole like spreadsheet report that has the key card openings, the deadbolts, like all of that stuff is on this. But from people analyzing that report, it looked to professionals, it looked like somebody was trying to spoof or manipulate the data that was going to come through, right? Because it was like, key card swiped, door unlocked, key card swiped again, door locked. Like it was just like kind of this like chaos the whole afternoon. Like after because he was last seen at like noon, and then he orders room service at like 1. And then, so for this whole time, there's all of this weird stuff going on with the door locks, which doesn't really make a lot of sense unless people are coming and going a lot or whatever. So let's say you were going to go down the rabbit trail of perhaps Paddock didn't bring all of these weapons into the room himself, like they said that they did. Because the only thing that they really said was that there was security footage that he brought in all this stuff at these times, right? But it's like a picture of him with a bellhop behind him with luggage on it, but there's nothing that connects him to that. Like that could have been somebody else's luggage. It was just it's not specific enough to convince me that Paddock brought all this stuff in. But
Sure.
if people are bringing a bunch of weapons and ammo and all this stuff in to stage this event, maybe those doors were being opened and closed that many times. Like, we don't really know. But the key card stuff and the door lock stuff was really weird.
How many key cards did we say? I don't know. I can't remember if we mentioned that in the first episode. How many key cards were issued to the room?
There was 5 key cards made for
That's
each room.
right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So a single person, a lone gunman, a lone wolf. Doesn't make sense in that vein. So after the shooting at 11:32, right after police breach the room, keep that in mind. There's a man that is in the room below on the 31st floor. So he calls 911 and reports that he heard what sounded like an explosion coming from the room above him. And then he looks out his window and he sees like glass shards and, shrapnel raining down from the room above him. So this is 12 minutes after they breach Paddock's room. This gentleman calls and says, sounds like an explosion went off, blah, blah, blah. You can hear the 911 call. You can hear the man. What is super weird to me is this man who called because he heard an explosion, we have radio silence from him with the whole shooting. So the whole 10 minutes where there's automatic gunfire and all of this chaos going on in the room above him, he doesn't call 911.
Not once.
Not once. He doesn't call until 11:32, and which is 12 minutes after the police enter Paddock's room. And all of a sudden he calls and says, there's an explosion going on. It just seems really weird. So another thing,
and if the police are already in the room, why is there an explosion?
Right.
Or was that the 3-round burst that guy let off?
Well, no. So about the 3-round burst. So on that body cam footage, when they enter the room, you hear the 3-round burst, and then you hear somebody else off camera that says, "Nice shot," or he says, "Hands up, nice shot," or something like that. Like this was an intentional 3-round burst. I don't know. It's very weird. Like, you wouldn't say nice shot after somebody accidentally discharged their weapon. You'd be like, what the frick are you doing? Like, you trying to kill somebody? Like, what do you, like, you'd be upset about it because we're talking life and death with these weapons, right? But he says, nice shot. So here's my speculation on this part. You tell me what you think.
Okay.
So they enter the room. They realize that they need this window broken because to fit the narrative that either they've been given or whatever. So 12 minutes after they breach the room, they put these charges on the window in a systematic pattern to break it in order to make it appear as though he was shooting out of both rooms. That's what it seems like to me. Because then in the photos that you see, the official, not the leaked ones, but the official crime scene photos come out, and that window is broken. There's shrapnel all over the ground, and the curtains have like burn marks. Not like, I mean, if the curtain's open, he's not shooting through the curtain. Why would there be burn marks on the curtain?
And these are the same curtains that in the body cam footage didn't have any burn marks. Are
pristine. Yeah.
And the window wasn't broken.
Right.
So it seems plausible to me that, if you need to reconstruct the scene to fit the narrative, you would want to probably break another window because all of the guns are in that room.
And that's the bigger room. So it
doesn't make any sense that he would have all those guns staged in the other room and was shooting out of in the other room where the door was locked.
Right.
Like, so they would have to break that window in order to continue the narrative.
So, and if they used explosives to get into the room, here's another thing. I know we talked about the smoke alarms, but if they used a small charge to get into the room, which doesn't make sense because they probably could have just kicked the door in. Like, or
use a key card.
Or even if it's locked from the inside and use a key card, you can kick those doors open. It's not.
Didn't Compost give them a key card?
Yeah, they had a master key card.
Yeah.
So they set off a charge to get in there, and the smoke alarm goes off. at that point when they're breaching the room is when. So it doesn't go off the entire time he's shooting these thousands of rounds from all these different weapons. It goes off when they set off a very small charge to get into the room. Or was it when they set off a larger charge? Right. Was it when they set off a larger charge to break the window?
Right. Because I've seen the body cam footage, and I don't remember there being a breach charge on the door.
I don't remember that either. And the door was already like Swiss cheese because he'd fired 30-something rounds outside at the security guard. So, which is just weird. And then the smoke alarm goes off at that point, not before. And so going back to the window being broken, there's like soot almost, like burn marks and soot on the curtains that are right there. Can you think of a scenario where a gun would cause that? And if you weren't shooting, because there was no bullet holes in
it. You would have to be shooting through it in order to get that type of. You would get some carbon splatter on there, but no. I mean, shooting, especially with those weapons, shooting through a curtain would be dumb anyway. So you would want to move the curtain out of the way. Like,
and very clearly, in the body cam footage, when they get into the room, the officer goes, "We have an open curtain, but the window is not broken."
Yeah.
So anyway.
I mean, this just goes to show you why they don't want that body cam footage to come out, and why they told them to turn it off, because they knew that there was a discrepancy. They knew that these police officers, especially these ones that went into the room, those guys are very suspect to me, because it
was like a ragtag group of them.
Yeah, and it's almost like they had their own little team. They knew exactly who was going to breach. And as soon as they said, turn off your body cams, they all did it as if it was all pre-designed. And then once they got in there, they're acting like they're supposed to be acting normal, right? As if their body cams are off.
Right.
So we can surmise that everything that they're saying and everything that they're doing on that body cam is normal activity for them as regular humans, because they don't think that they're being filmed. Right. So saying that the window's not broken, saying nice shot, like all of those different things, those are things that nobody was ever supposed to hear.
No, and those are things that are just like, they're just like it sounds like just a genuine, a bunch of guys that work together. There was on part of the footage where like one of the officers goes over to like the mini bar area, and then one of them goes, "Do you want some Pringles?" And then one of them grabs a water bottle off of the counter and starts drinking the water bottle, and it just seemed very strange behavior when this mass casualty event is happening. So here, another thing, and this will remind you probably a little bit of another story that we've told on this podcast, but they were doing active shooter training drills.
They were?
The whole week before, actually, they were doing these active shooter training drills. The police department did hire crisis actors to come in. So it seems to me more like maybe these guys thought that this was just another drill. Is what it seems like. Part of the scenario. So scenario's over. We've breached the room. We've done our job. Do you want some Pringles? Kind of a thing. Because any police officer would know you're not going to tamper with the scene. You're not going to go over and grab the Pringles and go through the mini bar and, grab a bottle of water and just start walking down the hallway drinking it like la-di-da. You're not going to do that, right?
Right.
You're going to preserve, because this is drilled into their minds to preserve the integrity of crime scenes. Like, and
the chatter that's going on the microphones on their radios should be giving them a sense of urgency to get on with other things.
Right.
There are other things going on all over your
over
town.
The place. And you can hear that on other police officers that are on duty that night. You can hear on their body cam footage, shots fired at the Tropicana, shots fired here, shots fired there. We have a woman dead over here. It was like
somebody came in all night with a machine gun to the Bellagio. Yes. Like there's no
sense of
things.
Urgency in these men, is what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't make any sense how they they breached this room, all this stuff doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, this one's getting long. I think we're going to keep talking and probably put this into a 3-parter, but I want to get into, before we cut this one off, I want to get into the multiple guns, because the crowd is hearing multiple caliber sounds coming from all different directions. We talked about that a little bit on the first one, but I want to talk a little bit more about that, because now we're talking about the room, we're talking about paddock, how the weapons were laid out in the room, only one window's broken, only 8 rounds on the ground. So where were all these gunshots coming from? The smoke detectors aren't going off. There's no indication that any guns were going off from the room, except for the one with, through the 134. So where did all these gunshots come from?
Well, and another weird thing with the gunshots is, we talked about bump stocks, and it kind of explained how those work, but a bump stock absolutely would not work on a bipod, right? Because the bipod is to keep the weapon stationary, but a bump stock, the actual term bump stock, comes from the recoil of the weapon coming back and hitting your shoulder and pushing it forward into your finger, and then shoulder, finger, right? So
which means the rifle needs to actually move forward and backwards.
You don't want a stationary weapon with a bump stock, because it's not going to work. It's literally not possible.
But they were all sitting around on bipods.
But there's the weapons that are seemingly facing the windows are all on bipods. There's obviously other weapons laying around, but they're like set up, like staged. They're not like they got thrown onto the ground. And not to mention, would you just abandon your weapon, or would you just put in a new magazine if you've got thousands of rounds of magazines and your weapon is seemingly firing perfectly, because you could hear it in all of the footage? It's like very precise. Like, you're not having any issues with this bump stock, which is really weird, because that does not happen, especially on a bipod. It just, I don't know, it feels very...
So the cadence of being in the military and shooting a lot of guns throughout my time, there is a certain cadence to weapons. When you're shooting a 3-round burst, it's very distinct. It's a 3-round burst. I've done it lots. It's very distinct, 3-round burst, and that's what you hear in that body cam footage. Well, they were hearing that over their radios all night long, 3-round bursts going off. They were also hearing machine gun fire, which, going through whole belts of rounds. We're not talking about 100-round magazines. We're talking about a machine gun that's just going and going and going and going and going for long periods of time. And that doesn't make any sense with these weapons that are sitting in the room, and with bump stocks. It just doesn't make any sense. Plus, no shell casings on the ground. All of these different things. The room narrative doesn't make any sense. And the people that are on the ground are, and I'll remind you, this is a Jason Aldean concert. We're talking lots of country fans. And what do you get with country fans? You get a lot of people that love guns, a lot of people that understand and understand guns, understand how they work, and they've shot a lot of them. You even had a lot of military personnel in the crowd. You had a lot of police officers in the crowd, things like that were just there watching the concert. So these people are witnesses now to this event, and they're telling us from their own mouths that there was more than one gunman, and there was lots of different caliber weapons going off, and there was lots of different cadence of weapons going off, meaning there was 3-round bursts going off, there was single round shots going off, and there was machine gun fire going off. Those are all the different sounds that they're hearing. And if you haven't seen this documentary that we've linked in the show notes, you have to watch it, because to get the full story, it's really hard to do on a podcast. This woman puts all of this information together and does a really, really good job of visually laying out the whole scene and going through all of this. But what these people are reporting is multiple weapons, multiple calibers, multiple cadences. And that just doesn't jive with this 10-minute narrative of firing. It just doesn't. And with the weapons that are in the room. So next week, or it'll be 2 weeks now, we're going to get into the different calibers of weapons. We're going to get into where all of the other shootings were going on all throughout the strip. We might get into a couple of the 911 calls. I definitely want to talk about the Hispanic lady that predicted all of this happening and was going up and telling everybody, get out of here because there's going to be a shooting tonight. All of these things are very interesting, and you don't want to miss part 3 of this. We hope you're enjoying this. We know that it's long. We know that there's a lot of information and you're having to kind of go through it, but just bear with us. It's all going to come together and it's all going to make sense. And in the end, you're going to find out that this doesn't make any sense and that there had to be an inside job. It had to be some sort of a planned event. And we'll get into why we personally think it was planned in part 3. So with that, we're going to move on and get out of here. But we're so glad. We are so thankful that you guys come back and listen to these episodes. I'm getting a lot of good feedback about this false flag series that we're doing. And it's all positive. You guys are liking it, and we're going to continue to do this. We were talking about maybe doing some JFK stuff. We're talking about
a weird one.
Doing lots of different things. So guys, stay tuned. We've got lots of cool things coming up. Don't forget, next week we've got John Kerwin. There's just so much fringy stuff to talk about, and we can't stop a freight train. So stay tuned for episode 3 of this series, and
even if that was a little bit longer, we'll get through it because I don't want to do this. Could be an 87 part.
It really could
deal because there's just so much information. But at some point, it gets to the point where we don't know. We just don't know what happened, and so we can rehash all this stuff and do all this. But if you want the visual and the audio and all that stuff, go watch this documentary. Even if you search for this documentary on YouTube with the exact words, you can't find it. Right. You can only get to it by using the link that is provided. Because I tried to just search for it and it's unsearchable.
Yeah, but it's very difficult.
We'll put the link down in there, and it's really, she does a really good job, and you can tell she's got a lot of passion. She's from Nevada. You can tell she's got a lot of passion for this. And I think Rick just had a little explosion.
He just had an accidental burp.
He just had an accidental discharge of gas.
All right, you guys, this has been a good time. Hopefully you're learning a lot, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you soon. Peace.